Welcome everyone, this is Jen for Solamo and welcome back to this video lesson. And today we are going to discuss Chapter 7, Unit 2, Contact between European and Indigenous Australians. Find this lesson on your book on pages 279 to 282.
At the end of this lesson, you will be able to identify the cause of conflicts between European settlers and Aboriginal Australians, recognize the hierarchy of races called the Great Chain of Being from the European point of view, list examples of conflicts between the two different communities, the European settlers and the Aboriginal Australians, and lastly, assess the significance of the events at Mile Creek. But before we start with our new lesson, let's have a short review of our previous lesson. I'll be giving you 2 minutes to finish everything. Are you ready? Time starts now. Now let's check your answers. Okay, let's have the first one. There were 2 distinct points of views or perspectives on the colonization and extension of settlement in Australia. So first, the European believed that Australia was settled peacefully, the land was explored and occupied, farms were developed, towns were established, people accumulated wealth and progress was made. But for the indigenous people, Australia was invaded, resistance was met with violence, and land was stolen. Aboriginal people were dispossessed from their country, and they were killed by disease and their culture was disregarded. However, evidence shows that both cooperation and conflict occurred when Indigenous Australians and the British colonies came into contact. Okay, next, impact of disease. So Australian Aboriginals had a very limited immunity to a range of diseases, including smallpox and tuberculosis. Even common colds and influenza are believed to have been potentially fatal or deadly for Aboriginals. In 1789, smallpox epidemic is believed to have killed about half of the Aboriginal population in the area of modern Sydney. Okay, now let's have the last one, cooperation and friendship. So cooperation was evident when Aboriginal people, their country, culture and freedom were respected. Good. And Use of European resources. Aboriginal people used European resources to improve the effectiveness of their weapons and tools. And blank of Aboriginal people. That means Aboriginal were employed as houseboys, domestic servants, gardeners, and other. What's the answer? Employment of Aboriginal people. And in return, they received support for members of their extended family. Third one, recognition of Aboriginal land ownership. So example of that is Batman's Treaty. So John Batman organized a treaty with local Wurundjeri elders to buy land in the Port Phillip Bay area in 1835. And also we had the story of friendship between Alexander Coley and Mokare. All done, everyone! Today's lesson is just a continuation of Unit 2, but this time we are going to focus on conflicts. So let's begin. Conflict. Conflict or not peaceful cooperation characterized much of the expansion of the settlement in the colonies. And why? Why do you think it's inevitable? It's because the British settlers disregarded or disrespect sacred or holy sites, fenced Aboriginal land, destroyed sources of food and water, and they abused women. And according to historian Henry Reynolds, he estimated that around 2,000 British colonies died at the hands of the Aboriginal people during the 19th century, while probably 10 times that number of Aboriginal people were killed by the colonists. So here are the three aspects of the British way of life which caused the seeds of conflict. From Western Australian historian's book, Broken Spears, Aboriginals and Europeans in the southwest of Australia. Okay, the first one. Okay, the use of human labor. Aboriginal people experienced slavery during that time. They were forcibly sent to work, and sometimes far from their homes in often terrible or horrific conditions. Okay, second, Europeans were so concerned on how to accumulate material wealth, and the idea of the private property, such as fencing off the land to stop others from entering, caused the conflicts between Europeans and Aboriginals over land. So this led to battles, wars, massacres, and others. And these factors were significant in Aboriginal and European relationships in all of the colonies into the 20th century. Okay, remember from the Aboriginals' point of view, they believed that Europeans did not respect or disregard them, their culture, their land. And why? One of the reasons for this was because of racial discrimination. From European point of view, there was a hierarchy of races. That is, the most capable or civilized race was at the top, and the least developed or civilized race on the bottom. So this is the great chain of being. So let's start from the top. That's the British. They believe they're the most advanced and educated people in the world, followed by the Mongols, and then Native Americans, and Africans, and the lowest, the Australian Aboriginal people. Aside from that, they also believe in blood or racial purity. So, they did not encourage intermarriage between races because that weakened the superior race. Okay? So, full blood or half caste were also the terms used to describe the Aboriginal people. By the second half of the 19th century, another idea was believed to support these racial theories. That is, the survival of the fittest race, which derived from Charles Darwin's study of the survival of animal species and have been termed social Darwinism. So colonists believed that the British were the most highly developed race on the globe, and other races were seen as uncivilized, uneducated, or savages or barbarians. So what's the idea of survival of the fittest race? So that means the powerful and the strong races survive, and the weakest die. Okay, next. The historical and biological links to Britain became source of pride to many colonial Australians as they emphasized the importance of maintaining crimson thread of kinship or blood links with Great Britain. So Australian colonists were so proud of their wealthy cities, their strong work ethic, growing colonial empire, and their naval and military power. So they really emphasize or give importance of maintaining or keeping the blood links with Great Britain. Okay. Now let's have an example in New South Wales. This is what we call the Mile Creek Massacre. So there have been many massacres and killing of Aboriginals that have gone unrecorded in Australian history. But the Mile Creek Massacre stands out as it's the only one of its type where the perpetrators or the killers were punished for the crimes against the Aboriginals. Well, on the 10th June 1838, 12 armed stockmen or people who look after livestock rode onto Henry's Danger's property at Mile Creek in northern New South Wales and rounded up like animals 28 friendly Aboriginal elderly men, women, and children. Those were the relatives of the Aboriginal men who were working with the station manager William Hobbs. And then the 12 stockmen then dragged the Aboriginals into the bush and killed every last one. Their bodies were then burnt, and the cowardly attack on the elderly Aboriginal men and women and children was well planned. And this made headlines in Australian newspapers because the Europeans involved in the crime were put on trial. Although the men were freed following the first trial, they were later retried and 7 were executed for the crime. And now let's see how racist the colonists were during that time. One juror was quoted in the Australian newspapers as saying, "I look on the blacks as a set of monkeys, and the earlier they are exterminated from the face of the earth, the better. I would never consent or allow to hang a white man for a black one. I knew well they were guilty of the murder, but I, for one, would never see a white man suffer for shooting a black." What can you say about that? Now let's have example of conflict in Van Diemen's Land or Tasmania. So before European settlement, historians estimated that the population of Tasmania was between 3,000 and 15,000. However, by 1835, the population of indigenous Tasmanians was reduced to about 150. So how did it happen? Tensions between the two communities emerged as the Europeans began settling. And this escalated to the point that the years 1828 and 1832 are described as the Black Wars. So, indigenous Tasmanians and settlers fought a guerrilla-style war during which a bounty was paid by the government for captured Aboriginals. So that means the government was encouraging the colonists to capture Aboriginals in return of money or bounty. And look at that. Here's in our source 2I. The declaration of martial law on 1st November 1828 in the vaguely defined settled districts legalized the killing of Aboriginal peoples. What does that mean? Legalize. So that means that they will not be punished if they kill Aboriginal. So see that? they will not be punished, and they will receive money at the same time. Okay, now let's have another example of conflict in Swan River Colony in Western Australia. So while the Swan River Colony was settled later than New South Wales and Van Diemen's Land, some experiences there highlighted that this colony experienced frontier conflict. Now, what is frontier? It's a region at the edge of a settled area. And frontier conflict between Europeans and Aboriginal people, including battles, acts of resistance, and open massacres, started when pastoral expansion caused conflict over land. So one example of this is Battle of Pinjarra. Okay. The Pinjarra Massacre was a battle that took place in Pinjarra, Western Australia. And the massacre took place on the 28th of February 1834. The conflict was between 60 to 80 Aboriginals of the Pinjarra tribe and 25 European soldiers and policemen who carried out the attack, led by Governor Captain James Stirling. And if you can still remember, he was the first governor of the Swan River Colony. Okay, what caused the Pinjarra battle? The attack on Pinjarra tribe was motivated by earlier attacks on white settlers. It also happened because Governor Stirling wanted revenge on the Pinjarra tribe. For the earlier attacks on white settlers, Governor Stirling wanted to affirm his authority and power over the Aborigines or the Aboriginals. And this battle was one of the most notorious massacres of Aboriginals in Australian history. They caught them at the river crossing. When the Aborigines showed signs of retaliation, Stirling and his men opened fire. No one knows how many people were killed. Did any one of them punished for this massacre? For killing the Aboriginals? No, because this was considered legal action, so no one was sent to jail. Okay, another conflict took place in Swan River Colony. We called it conflict at Lagrange Bay. So here, as the frontier of Western Australia extended, pastoralists moved into Aboriginal land, and three men, while searching for new pastoral land near at Lagrange Bay, were murdered by the Aboriginals in November 1864, and a monument was erected in 1913 as memorial to these men and the colonists who found their bodies. Now let's analyze these sources. So, what were the different points of view on this conflict at Lagrange Bay? So, for the Europeans, as you can see in source 2M, the three men were like heroes. They died in search for new pastoral land, and they deserve to be given tribute or honor. That's why they have built this monument. However, another plaque was constructed, and this showed the Aboriginal perspective. So, for the Aboriginals, the monument describes the events at Lagrange from one perspective only, the viewpoint of the white settlers. No mention is made of the right of Aboriginal people to defend their land or of the history of provocation which led to the explorer's death. The punitive party mentioned here ended in the deaths of somewhere around 20 Aboriginal people. The whites were well armed and equipped, and none of their party was killed or wounded. So this plaque was in memory of the Aboriginal people killed at Lagrange. It also commemorated all other Aboriginal people who died during the invasion of their country. That's the Aboriginals' points of view. Okay, now we're done with our discussion, so let's move on to our activities. Here's the first one. Okay, for this activity, I want you to match the historical term to its definition. Okay, I'll give you 30 seconds. Okay, now let's check your answers. Number 1. Aboriginal people of Southwest Australia. That's Noongar people. And how about unexplored land? The answer, terra incognita. Okay, number 3, Aboriginal country. And number 4, that's Crown land. Number 5, frontier. Number 6, martial law. Number 7, hierarchy of races or great chain of being. Well done! Proceed to our second activity. So here you have 15 seconds to answer each slide. Let's check your answers. Number 1. So what 3 aspects of the British way of life caused conflict between Europeans and the Aboriginals? That's the answer? Okay, that's letter D, all of the above. Okay, next, number 2. The British belief in their superiority over indigenous peoples in their empire by the late 1800s was influenced by? It's also letter D, all of the above. Okay, next. 3. The crimson thread of kinship was? Letter C. Okay, membership to the British race or blood links with Great Britain. Okay, next, number 4. What made headlines in Australian newspapers because the Europeans involved in the crime were put on trial or were punished? That's letter A. Yes, Myall Creek Massacre. Okay, next, which colony used martial law to protect European farmers against Aboriginal attacks? It's letter C, Tasmania or Van Diemen's Land. Okay, number 6. Tasmania witnessed a huge decline in population of indigenous peoples in the years 1828 to 1832. For what reason? It's because of the Black Wars. Letter A. Number 7. What battle took place in Western Australia, which was considered as one of the most notorious massacres of Aboriginals in Australian history? And the answer is letter C. Okay, next, number 8. This conflict involved 3 British settlers who were murdered as they were searching for new pastoral land. And the answer? Letter A. Conflict at Lagrange Bay. Great job! Now let's move on to our third activity, which is also the summary of our lesson. Okay, let's do this together. Conflict. Okay, it means not peaceful cooperation due to lack of understanding of indigenous life, racial discrimination, and desire for land and material gain. So racial discrimination and frontier conflict. British who colonized Australia believed that British were the most highly developed race on the globe. Theories such as the Great Chain of Being and racial purity, and also Charles Darwin's survival of the fittest, reinforce their attitudes. Historical and biological links to Britain became source of pride to many of them. and frontier conflict between Europeans and Aboriginal people, including battles, acts of resistance, and open massacres, started when pastoral expansion caused conflict over land. Okay, examples of conflicts. Nile Creek Massacre in New South Wales. This involved brutal murder of 28 Aboriginal men, women, and children on the Nile Creek Cattle Station in New South Wales. Black Wars in Tasmania. Indigenous Tasmanians and settlers fought a guerrilla-style war during which a bounty was paid by the government for captured Aboriginals. And Pinjarra Battle in Western Australia. Governor Sterling revenged on Pinjarra tribe for the earlier attacks on white settlers, and Governor Sterling wanted to affirm his authority and power over the Aboriginals. And conflict at Lagrange Bay. 3 men searching for new pastoral land were speared and clubbed to death. And that's the end of our lesson for today. Okay, for the self-assessment section, I want you to tick the box which you think you can do and cross it out if you still have questions, and try to review the lesson again.
Goodbye everyone! Thank you for watching, keep safe, and see you next time!